Your Town Matters is funded by the Government of Canada through the Local Journalism Initiative and supported by Cactus Media, Canada's independent community television association.
I'm Vicki Hogarth, and welcome to Your Town Matters. I'm joined today by the Mayor of St. Andrews, Brad Henderson. Thanks for being here today, Brad.
Pleasure to be back.
A lot to talk about today. I wanted to start off today's interview, though, by talking about the meeting that you recently had with municipal leaders and Chris Austin of Public Safety at the Algonquin Hotel. And I know that policing was top of the agenda. Can you give us just an overview of what that meeting was about?
Yeah, so policing has been a very relevant topic all across the region, all across the province, but specifically if you look at all of the communities in Charlotte County, it seems like there's been a little bit of a change of direction where property crime, drugs, a lot of problems in the unsheltered population doesn't necessarily mean crime, but there's relation there. It definitely seems like the last few years that it is growing at a rapid pace, unfortunately. So a number of the mayors in Charlotte County have gotten a little bit more vocal, including myself, where we actually asked to have a meeting with Chris Austin to discuss the policing situation in New Brunswick. And what came out of that is the minister decided he was going to go to every regional service commission across the province. So he just visited our region. The meeting was at the Algonquin in St. Andrews, and the meeting was on policing only. The RCMP was present, as were representation from every community. The primary invitations went out to the mayors and CAOs of every community. And then we had an honest conversation. Wasn't really sure which way the meeting was going to go, but right off the get-go, Minister Austin has identified that he does understand that we do have a challenge. And first of all, with his budget, he did do an increase in the amount of funds available for frontline officers. But specifically how he acknowledged the problem is he had basically a one-page document which basically said that in Canada, crime is decreasing, but in New Brunswick, specifically, it is increasing. So it's opposite of the national trend. The other two graphs showed that the amount of officers we have to population, so they call it cop to pop, we are above the national standard, meaning that we have less officers per population in our community. And then the last variable that he actually demonstrated on the graph was if you look at the percentage of solved crimes, New Brunswick is behind the national average. So three very concerning stats that he owned and said that we need to do better. And then the rest of the time was focused on finding solutions. I will also say that he did identify that over the last 10 years in the province of New Brunswick, there has been no increases in our police budget, which basically means that although crime is up, they've had to do it with less resources due to inflation. So if you look at all these variables, it's kind of a perfect storm and not really a surprise to why right now it seems like we're moving in the wrong direction. The good news is he acknowledged it and gave an opportunity for all the different mayors and CAOs and attendees at the meeting to discuss some of the options we can to improve policing, including a few options that I threw on the table.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about maybe what some of those options are?
Absolutely. So first of all, in other regions, there's a mobile crisis unit. If you look at our RCMP officers, a lot of the calls that they're actually getting right now are related to mental health and addiction services. And if you look at when they usually get those calls, it's usually evenings and weekends. We don't really have much open in our area for resources, so it's not uncommon for an RCMP officer to have to accompany someone to St. John to get the services that they need. So one mental health call can easily eat up a whole officer's shift. One addiction services could eat up a whole officer's shift. So in other regions, they have a mobile crisis unit. If we had that there, it gives them some local support on evenings and weekends to provide some solutions. And that has been effectively used in other regions. So it's a program that should be considered for this area. The other one is the courthouse. So every time one of our officers has to go to court, because of the closure a few years back in St. Stephen, they now have to travel all the way to St. John. So you can imagine that's another officer off our street that's traveling back and forth. And Al McEachern actually brought to my attention, there's also where people are stealing from their neighbors. They go to St. John. You don't actually have to face your neighbor. But if it's in a local court, there's a good chance that the people that are impacted will be in the courtroom with you, looking at you. And there's some value in that. And then the other thing that's related to that for the courts is you used to hear a lot more about prosecutions and what happened. It's not really covered anymore. So in court in St. John, you don't really hear what happened to that person that did that. And I think that's important for the community to understand that there are repercussions, but also so they're aware that how many times are people just getting let off back in the street with just a slap on the wrist. So a lot of value in those two items. And the other thing that I did want to highlight is that in a meeting that we had with our sergeants is we encourage the RCMP to post more on social media. Right now there's a lot of people that on social media don't believe there's any real response when you call a police officer. We'll start posting kind of your arrest so people are aware that people are being arrested. And secondly, if someone's wanted in the area and it's a public document, put them on social media because people in the community can help identify and let RCMP know where they are. And we've seen an increase in that, and people are actually the last couple months have said that they've noticed more from the RCMP, and that should continue.
And I know from the RSC10 RCMP meeting that was earlier in 2023 that repeat offenders seemed to be what all the communities were saying they wanted to be a police priority.
100%. I don't know what percentage of crimes done by repeat offenders, but it's got to be a high percentage. And I don't think as mayor I'd have much sway in kind of the justice system, but if you've caught someone breaking into someone's house and they get let go and then they do it again, like, why are we being so soft on them? Like, if people are going to continue, and I know times are tough, I know there's lots of circumstances around it, but if you're going to continue doing that and put, threaten people's livelihood, but also, seniors in our community, maybe someone living alone, making them live in fear, I don't think we should have a whole lot of sympathy for that. There is a lot of things that the minister's looking at as well in the actual, prison system that we have as far as implementing programs to help, I guess you could say, discourage people from being repeat offenders, giving them some tools and some resources to help them. So all those things are good solutions. The minister had a complete action plan, and it had about 20 different items on it. So it's good to see, again, the additional funds for our CMP officers, but it's good to see that the minister has taken accountability for the situation. We got a long way to go, but that's the first step, because it felt like early on when we complained about policing, whether it be to the RCMP or whoever, we were kind of just told our communities were safe, and that's not what we want to hear. Yes, at the end of the day they are, but there is a perception out there that they are not, and they're moving the wrong direction, and it's a lot easier to stop something before it gets bad. I'd say Sayers is an extremely safe community, but if it ever went the other way, how hard would it be to change it back? It's easier to stop it right now is the way I look at it.
And I want to look at St. Andrews because we cover Eastern Charlotte, we cover St. Stephen as well, and in those two communities, it's become harder to cover. There's a lot more crime that is happening there, and St. Andrews doesn't seem to be on the same level right now. But from your perspective as mayor, are you seeing crime, theft on the rise within this community, and to what degree should the community be aware?
I would say that I can see a rise. To compare it to the other areas, maybe across Charlotte County, I would say we're probably in a little bit better of a situation. But if you look at some of the other communities in Charlotte County, they didn't see it coming. I can honestly say I see it coming. Like, to think that we're on an island here in the St. Andrews and surrounding area, we're not. Some of the people that are committing crime in St. Stephen or Eastern Charlotte or wherever, they easily can come to St. Andrews, and we actually have specific examples of that happening. So I would say that people should be aware that there are people out there doing that, and there is things you can do. Like the days of leaving your car unlocked and leaving valuables inside Unfortunately, those are not here right now. There is a certain obligation we have to have as homeowners and property owners to do the best you can to secure your personal belongings. Is that something that I say is the solution going forward? No. No one should be on your property at night is my view on that. But in the same sense, you can make it a lot harder to become a victim. And I'm hoping people realize that the days of just leaving your house unlocked and going away for a week, those were great times, but I'm not so sure that we're at those stages now, and I don't know if we will be in the foreseeable future.
The province is promising, I do believe it's about 80 new officers province-wide on the ground in the year ahead. But where they decide to place those officers really depends on the need. So what we've been told, and I'd love you to elaborate on this, that it's important when you do see something that is worth reporting to report it, because that all goes into a data entry that will help create their decisions for where they place these officers.
You're exactly right. An RCP officer told me that they don't have a very good success rate of figuring out crime they're not aware happened. So obviously calling it in is just, I know people don't think it'll happen. Please call it in, because it does build a business case that we need more resources. Other thing they'll be looking at is our regional population versus the amount of officers we have. That'll be all into play. But yeah, as far as the actual resources, what we're getting in our region, we did ask that question, and we're supposed to hear soon. Out of those 80 officers you mentioned, from my understanding, 59 of them will be frontline officers. The other 21 will be going to special units like cybercrime and different departments like that. But and I do think that, to prepare the public, that I do not think that those 80 officers will be in the street in 1 year. I think that the days of being able to open up a recruitment office and have a lineup at the RCMP aren't there anymore. There's a lot of people that know it's a tough profession, so it's going to take them a while to successfully recruit those. But they have targets in place. They have hired a few. They're going to continue to focus on it. But back to your original comment, I'm looking forward to hearing what does that mean for this region. An extra officer in Eastern Charlotte is good for this community. An extra officer in St. Stephen is good for this community. When they're short, they pull officers from everywhere. The more we have in this region, the safer it all is in our community.
And you brought up a really interesting point earlier in this conversation about the Charlotte County Courthouse. When it was here, then people from the community could go to the courthouse to watch these cases and watch these trials and hold people accountable. Is there any sense that the courthouse, as we navigate the idea of having it repurposed, could go back to its original purpose?
I did mention to Chris Austin. I actually let him know that I understand there's certain security regulations that have to be in courtrooms, especially if you've got like a trial on someone who might be at risk to the general population. But I also know that our officers going up for traffic crime is hauling them away. Is there any way that courthouse, to your point, could be repurposed to be an active courthouse again? I know that even in Graham and Ann, they're asking about, during COVID, they started doing virtual court sessions. They were actually asking if it's possible to bring that back. I never thought of that perspective, but the mayor, Bonnie Morris, actually said that there's a lot of cases where there's actually a crime in Graham and Ann where the victim and the suspect, or the person that's appearing in court, the defendant, is on the same ferry ride headed to St. John. So you can imagine kind of the environment on a 1.5 hour ferry ride with someone that you're going to court with that you might be a victim of. I'd like to think there's a better way of going about it. And yeah, that courthouse is in good condition. It ran for a lot of years, and I would welcome the opportunity. Mr. Austin was taking it back, as it was a suggestion, as a solution to how our officers will not be traveling to St. John so much.
And it's honestly, as a journalist covering many municipalities across this region, something I haven't just heard here in St. Andrews. This has been as far as Macadam. Ken Stenix has said he'd like to see that back in place as well.
Yeah, we have one.
I'll shift gears to talk about bylaw enforcement. Can you give us the latest update about how that's going to be going in the town?
Well, so it's kind of switching gears, but yet it's not. So the town of St. Andrews has kind of switched bylaw enforcement around, where we don't think that it's necessarily a full-time position within the community. We want people, if they've got a challenge with somebody not respecting a bylaw in the community, whether it be parking across their driveway, whether it be a vicious dog off leash, we want to have some type of system, but we don't really want it to be like almost like an undercover operation where they're trying to find people without dog tags, where they're set up to stake out. We want it to very much be a reactive approach. Does not mean that we can't do proactive enforcement, but we really view that as a part-time position in the community. And before we kind of blended that role with the wharf. And if you think of when the wharf's busy and when bylaw enforcement is busy, it's the exact same time period. So the idea was we've switched the position where it would be part-time bylaw enforcement, but also part-time with the fire department. We are very fortunate to have such a great fire chief in Kevin Terrio, and we've got a lot of volunteers around him that will support him, but there's a lot of weekends and evenings and vacations that Kevin has had the radio on him because he has nobody else he can leave it with. And to give him some type of position, there used to be 1.5 positions in the town of St. Andrews. To give that 0.5 position back, I think would be very good. And of course, our fire chief was out on leave this past year, and it had a little gap. To have someone there, I think would provide a lot of value for us. But when I say those two, the other concept that we're actually discussing right now is certain times of year when it's not as busy, and there is times a year between those two positions, is perhaps maybe that town employee could actually do a few night shifts in the community, and that would be using a town vehicle to drive around and report any suspicious activity that we have. So we have policing services right now, but to give another set of eyes, that person would never approach anyone. That's not their role, but they're just there to report. It could be a situation where they observe a suspicious vehicle down by the Dragonfly Center got broken into this year. What if someone was around and noticed a car pulling in there and all they did was actually get the license plate or just keep an eye and report to RCMP anything they see? We could increase our amount of funds that we see in policing and in our community. I'm not so sure that would translate to an officer being in our community. We, as the town of St. Andrews right now, pays for 3 full-time officers. I think our officers a lot of the time are actually not in the community. We're really hesitant to pay for 4 when we're not sure we're getting the 3. But a town employee could be an extra set of eyes, and I think that having that communication with the RCMP could really be vital in making this community even safer. So it is something we are exploring right now.
Wow. So, and when will that go into effect, the evening shift?
I don't know in the evening hour. We've got to set up some policies. We want to make sure that it's, first of all, safe for the employee. I think that they should be meeting with the RCMP as well as town officials. So we should really develop a policy around it. Again, we don't want someone going down an alley and then a bylaw enforcement officer on foot by themselves at night going after them. Like, we really need to make sure that we're doing this safely, but to have someone patrol in a town vehicle, I think it makes a little bit of sense right now in the climate we are, and there is some value in some of these people that are making the decisions to do property crime and other things, to let them know that there is another set of eyes in our community. There's some value in that as well.
Wow, so it's a proactive approach to potentially dealing with the crime before it gets...
To be determined what exactly looks like when it starts, but it's something that we are exploring, and the individual that is now hired in the position was aware it was something that we were looking at as part of the application time. So more to come on that. At first it's like, do you want people to know that's happening? Yes, you do. You want to proactively let people know that you are putting additional resources to make the community safe.
Oh, I look forward to following this. I know there are a lot of communities exploring with the idea of neighborhood watch, some other kind of set of eyes.
That's the equivalent. It's the equivalent of an active neighborhood watch is the way that we look at it right now.
Okay. Now this will be a real gear shift to the wharf. I know there was a special council meeting this past week where again, maybe we could give the backstory on where we're at with the wharf and the improvements that need to be done, and then the options that are before us now.
Yeah, so the town of St. Andrews has gone through this. Feels a bit like Groundhog Day. We looked at a number of options. I don't think we had 5. I think we only had 4 the first time. I don't remember the hybrid option, which I'll speak to. But the town of St. Andrews basically was able to secure funding from both levels of government as well as the municipality. So the provincial and federal government was going to give about 70% of the funds to rebuild the wharf. And as part of that process, when we got approved, we looked at the best option, and the town at the time picked the concrete kind of option. But what happened is, while they were going through some of the things they had to do a study for birds underneath the wharf. There was consultations with First Nations. There was a number of things that had to happen, and then COVID hit, and what we saw is the prices skyrocketed on the project. So when we actually went at time to start getting engineers actual assessments and getting our RFP together, is it was deemed that the project cost had risen almost $2 million. When you're approved from the provincial and federal government, you're only approved up to that amount. Everything incremental the taxpayer of St. Andrews would have had to have paid, which means that the project cost for the town would have doubled. So what we did is we pumped the brakes and we went back to the provincial and federal government, and we've got unofficial word that they are going to cover the difference now. So now we're going through the process again, but a process that was 3 years ago or 4 years ago is not as relevant now because we are a different community. The residents of Shamcook and Bayside will be responsible for debt, just like the residents of the old town of St. Andrews. And although they were welcome to come to the sessions, when this first talk happened, we didn't know they'd be responsible for it. So we are going through consultation with the public. The 5 options, they range from just rehabilitating the wharf, which I don't think will be feasible because the funding is pending due to climate change, so we actually have to alter it. Just doing the original structure would not probably get us the funds from the government. That's over $5 million. So that option doesn't seem feasible, and the life expectancy could be 10 years on doing that. So really to replace it is the way that we're going, and it varies from infill to a hybrid infill option to using steel piles to using precast block and span. And what you're looking at is the new options range anywhere from $6 million to $7.8 million. A significant investment for the taxpayer of St. Andrews when the municipality's on for about 1.8 million of it roughly. So we want to make sure that we get this right. The infill might be the most durable, it might be the most cost effective, but is that the look we want when you look at our historic wharf and the way that it looks and the look and feel of our downtown? Is that the best option? Is there environmental impacts? All that stuff needs to be discussed. So lots more conversation, and I will say just on this, is the last council meeting I was a little vocal about it. Right now at the biological station we have a wharf that needs completely rebuilt. The town of St. Andrews has a wharf project that's about $7.8 million. Do we really need 2 wharves as a community? Is there an opportunity versus the federal government paying 100% for one and giving us about a third of the funds every time we need capital projects? Is there an opportunity to have one wharf in the community that has even better services than the other 2 combined had, because we have one focal point, and that would significantly save taxpayers' dollars for Canada, paying for one wharf, taxpayers' dollars for St. Andrews especially. And then the other thing is, what's the opportunity? Could you leave the old wharf approach up and have a little shopping village there with little huts? Like, let's think bigger. What else could we provide to attract cruise ships, yachts? Like, we could really have almost a hybrid hub. I know that's an economic driver for community, but it could be so much more if we just put our resources together
and create one workable wharf, and then we could keep the old one, you're saying, for potentially tourism.
There's huge savings there, right? I'm not saying that we just unload the wharf, hold the municipality accountable for something, but make it something bigger. Like, make it like I said, like a hub of activity. Right now it is, but again, it could be even more.
Well, it's my favorite place to walk my dog at night, so I'm very eagerly waiting what decision is made here. Can we talk a little bit about what's to come this fall? I know there are a lot of fall activities on the horizon. My personal favorite, I know you have a lot to do with this, Pumpkin Fest at Kingsbury is just the best fall day.
Well, you've got your husband, Patrick Claude, and of course at CHCO, he actually entered the pioneering. Well, he had no choice. I felt bad for him because I put him up against a bunch of kids, but he held his own.
You know what, though? His big mistake in the final minutes of our show, go off the rails, his big mistake was using a fork. Is that his competition were hands in. And I don't know if it was when he realized that we were in fact still recording that he decided to use a fork, and that was his downfall, because I think he really had it in him to take the pie.
Yeah, I think a girl actually that was in grade 11, I think, beat him. She was on her lunch break too from her job. So Sadie, I think it was.
Sadie Shaw.
Sadie Shaw.
She went hungry.
I think was she back-to-back champion, maybe?
I believe she is the back-to-back champion. And honestly, I'm not even kidding when I say I look forward to this all fall. It's beautiful. It's fun. And the pie eating contest at the end is it's hilarious, and the talents are across the board. They come from all over the province, even I think some from the U.S.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Guess the weight of the giant pie. It was the biggest pumpkin in the province last year at Kingsbury, so that one I always look forward to. Indulge, obviously. Every single event sold out instantly. That is, to me, that's almost the kind of the transition between our peak season and shoulder season. So it's a bit of a community celebration too of another great summer in St. Andrews. And then I'm the third one I'm really looking forward to is the Dragon Boat Festival, the regatta that they're having at Katie's Cove. to see the cove full of locals and raising money for the paddling club. I've got a team in it. I've already guaranteed victory, but I'm really looking forward to that. And that night is Oktoberfest at the Sayers Brewing Company. So a lot of people think, oh, everything happens July and August at Sayers, but really, fall's a special time of year, and then we're just around the corner, I hate to say it, from Christmas by the Sea. So
very excited.
Lots going on.
And in the final minutes, I guess, speaking of fall, NBCC, the students are back, and I know the town is playing an active role in supporting. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the engagement between the municipality and the New Brunswick Community College, and I guess it's my 8th year of the town, hard to believe. It is at a high since I've come back to this community. Heather Allaby, who is the vice president, kind of student experience, has really made it active to keep the town informed. I'm not saying that we have everything figured out. We still have to work on housing and things, but the enrollment decline that we've seen seems to be trending the opposite way right now. In the 2018, we had just, just over 200 students, maybe between 210 and 220. Last year we got up to 309, and this year we're closer to 350. So we are starting to see students, enroll in the community college, primarily driven from international students, but the local kind of students is up about 4.5%. So we're seeing a lot of trends to believe that the NBCC can rise, and they just hired a community coordinator, so someone that's in St. Andrews to interact with the community. Things like the Chamber of Commerce, things like Explore St. Andrews. It's pretty impressive to see them invest back and trying to be more connected to the community, and they just hired a new position there. So a lot of reason to believe that we're in a better place. And of course, housing developments, there's a few that are getting closer to being a reality here. There's actually a few that are recently converted. We've talked about the old veterinarian place across from the old clubhouse. I sound like James Mullinger's joke, but that is now a place for not students, but young workers. And then the Terra Manor has been recently acquired, and they're looking at doing some long-term rentals there too, from my understanding. So there's a few different things to get excited for in the community, and think that we're going to be better situated to accept more students in the future.
Wonderful. Well, we'll talk more on housing next time you're here. Thank you so much for being here today, Brad. I appreciate it.
The time as always. Thank you, CHCO.
My guest today has been the mayor of the town of St. Andrews, Brad Henderson. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Your Town Matters.